Earlier today, Fallout 76 got its massive locked and loaded update. This coming in at a whopping 60 gigabytes on consoles, and in this video, what I want to do is go over what exactly this update adds to the game, and hopefully strive to answer that question as to whether or not it's a good time to revisit Fallout 76 for you, as although this is one of the biggest updates the game's ever gotten, easily the biggest one of 2021 out of the two choices, it still may not be the best time for everyone to come back, and waiting may actually be kind of beneficial for at least some of you. And actually some of the problems or issues this update seemed to have immediately after going live. But either way, there's definitely a lot to unpack with this one, and starting things off, let's go over that download size. What you may notice is if you are playing on a console or you happen to own the game both on PC and consoles, the console download size is just way bigger at, again, 60 gigabytes, which I know for some of you out there just means you're not actually going to get to play today. But there's some good news for you also. As Bethesda did say, we made some significant improvements behind the scenes to reduce the game's overall size with this update, which makes for a very large download today, but moving forward, patch sizes will return to being much smaller. So first and foremost, one of the really cool things added to the game with this update are special loadouts. And this is one of those features that is a super healthy feature addition to the game over the long term. Basically now, after hitting level 25, you'll unlock the ability to use a punch card machine. You'd find these at train stations, Foundation, Crater, or just actually build one yourself at your camp after being level 25. And from here, what you'll find is you'll have two special slots, the one existing one that you are currently using on your character and a totally new blank one for you to edit. And from here, of course, you have full control over rearranging your special stats themselves, how many points you have in each of those special categories, but then also you can assign a ton of different perk cards to your second special slot, and then at any point quickly and easily go to one of these punch card machines and switch to a totally different build, with the most influential aspect of this being how easy it is to actually move around your special points. In the past, let's say you wanted to move around your special points, like let's say you had a strength build with 15 strength, but you wanted to try out more of a luck build and max that out instead. For every 1 point you wanted to move, it would cost you 1 level up, which was obviously super expensive. If you wanted to move 10 points and then have to unlock another couple of perks, it might end up costing you 20 level ups, which you could naturally see how that becomes a pretty big barrier to entry to actually mixing around your build from time to time. This totally removes that. You can now just move special points whenever you want, even on your current build. So not only does this give you the power of having two existing builds, but it also gives you way more access of just editing one of these two builds, even just the one you've been using this whole time. One of the issues you may run into, like me, immediately is just not having enough level ups or perk card unlocks. I used a ton of these when legendary perks came out that I had stored, so now I only have a few, and you'll probably end up wanting more if you're trying out some radically different build you haven't used before. But overall, this is just super refreshing. In Fallout 76, a lot of times builds are dictated by a legendary drop. And I'm sure if you played the game long enough, you've had that experience where, let's say you're a bloodied build, junkies build, some other kind of build altogether, but you get some kind of god roll, a weapon that you know is going to be super good for a specific build, but you're just not that build. In the past, I would just end up getting rid of that weapon, but now you could actually just add a new build that allows you to customize it to suit that weapon's needs and see how good it actually is, or even if it's better than your other build. I haven't looked up the optimal builds for Fallout 76 in literally years because it was just going to cost me too many level ups to make it practical to switch all the time. And it really is fun, just trying out something totally different. You've probably seen me using this flamer, melee weapons, or even heavy weapons so many times in the background, but very rarely a bow and arrow or crossbow and actually dealing decent damage with it. So it's another great feature to Fallout 76. It's easily a feature that will pay dividends over time, especially with some of the future updates like legendary crafting, because inevitably in the future you will craft some cool legendary, then want to try out a totally different or new build around this. Again, one of the only problems if you aren't a power user, aren't a super active player, is you may just genuinely not have enough perk cards unlocked, or may have scrapped a bunch of perk cards already, so you'll end up spending all of your level ups and perhaps won't have enough perk cards there to fulfill your new build, but it does give you something else to work towards. In a very similar vein, we also do have camp slots, which is another super awesome feature for this game. As effectively, what this will do is make it so you can actually deactivate your old camp and just place down a totally new camp in Fallout 76. So now you could functionally have two camps, not at the same time, but but on the fly, just turn one off and turn the other one on so you could just have a different base pop up in the world. In fact, you could just make 2 camps in the same location if you want. If you really like your spot, but you want to try a totally different base design, you could deactivate one and place down one new one right in the same spot. Or as I'm sure many people actually do, you can place it somewhere else on the map. And actually just a little tidbit, after this update, by default, your camp icon is off. So make sure you turn that on so other people can actually see your camp. If this says off, make sure you switch it to on so people could find your base again. Honestly, this one too is pretty straightforward. Moving your camp in Fallout 76 is pretty expensive. Not actually in the caps cost, it's like 40 caps to move your camp, but in that many camps are built around the terrain they are placed on. So if you're moving the camp, you basically have to start over and build something totally new. But in the process, you're kind of losing what you had before. You can create schematics and blueprints, but sometimes that gets really wonky. And it's kind of this big decision to create a new camp if you wanted to, or at least it used to be, as now you'll just have this secondary camp. So you could try out a totally new build, try out building a camp along a different location on the map, or even try a different build in the same location. I'm not a big camp builder, but this is a huge part of Fallout 76. You can see some of the stunning camps already being built and tested in the game, and giving these players the opportunity to build something new and interesting is great. More community and custom content around this game is definitely what it needed, and I think these camp slots are a great first step for that. In addition, as you may have noticed, the camp icons can now actually be customized, so you could change which icon is shown. You could also change the name of the camp. This is just for you though, it won't be shown publicly. The camp icon is shown publicly, along with if it has a vendor or a shelter. Although one thing you may have noticed with both camp slots and special loadouts is how each of them only have 2 slots right now, and it very much so seems like they would benefit from having more than 2 slots. So right now that's just not a thing. You can't get more than 2 slots for these. In the past, when some of these features were initially announced, Bethesda mentioned how the Atomic Shop could be one of the avenues by which they add additional slots, but it technically wasn't concrete or confirmed. And even just based off current data mines, there aren't even any things in the files that would suggest this is coming imminently. So in all likelihood, there probably will be purchasable methods of getting these in the future, or perhaps a part of the season system or Fallout first, but at least right now we technically don't even know. Although fortunately, if you're a camp builder, that is not the only change to come to camps today, and there's quite a few other improvements that will make this whole process a lot nicer. Right off the bat, on the Atomic Shop, there is a totally new shelter available for purchase. This coming in at a whopping 1,500 atoms, or around $15 or so. It actually does have a pretty nice layout. It's called the Vault Server Room, a similar layout to some of the other ones, pretty open with a few rooms for you to explore and build in, but this one kind of being a tease in that you could see an even larger world space that's meant to be a server, kind of act as the back dressing or something you could just look at through the window. There's a couple of different tangent rooms you could see through these windows, and no, you can't actually get in there, but you could look at it, and I guess that's kind of cool, right? One of the big updates is vending machines and display cases are now placeable in shelters, and both of these in general actually got some big updates. Items displayed in a display case no longer actually cost any camp budget. So if you put something in a display case, show it to the world, that will not affect your camp budget, which is really big because some of those camp budget costs were pretty expensive here. You may find a bit of additional room when you log in. And even further, vending machines will now have a universal inventory. So let's say you have a vending machine at camp 1 and then you turn on camp 2 that has a separate vending machine. That inventory will carry over. It'll be exactly the same. Same thing for vending machines in or out of shelters. They will both have identical inventories. And in the past, to get the max slots of inventory spaces on vending machines, you need to have 4 placed down. That was also removed. Now, just by using one vending machine, you can have all of your items on display in just one. No longer a need for 4 at all. Another pretty big one as far as camp builder potential goes is you can now stack 2x1 staircases on top of each other. There's no longer a need for dividers or other placements. You could kind of make spiraling upward staircases just with these alone now. But then, one of the other really large changes to come with this update are the daily ops changes. And we have a lot, both in new content and actually changes to the old content, including a reward rebalance. So first off, the new stuff. With this, daily ops got its biggest expansion yet. A brand new game mode, new enemies, new locations, and even new mutations these enemies can have. The new game mode is in many ways almost the opposite of the old game mode. In the old game mode, stealth was effectively disabled due to the base mutation, and what you had to do was go from point to point point and basically hold that point while waves of enemies attack you, and then eventually kill a bunch of other enemies and a boss. In the new game mode, stealth is encouraged, but even further, it's going to largely revolve around exploring the map and running around trying to find enemies to take down. They're not going to be as much finding you as much as you going to them. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Basically, the way it'll work is when you start off, you'll have to take down a certain amount of enemies. These will not be highlighted with quest markers, so you're going to have to run around the map and find them. This is probably the biggest change and probably what you'll spend the most time doing during this. And after you take down however many enemies you need to, you'll have to take down a specific enemy. There'll typically be a few options. They will have a quest marker on them, as that enemy is a code carrier. Once they drop the code, you go to deactivate some device, then you kind of restart the process over. You have to take down a few other enemies that won't have quest markers, then take down a code carrier, then deactivate another device, and so on and so forth. And you do this 3 times until it eventually leads into a boss fight. But a couple of considerations around this. Each time you deactivate a device using that code, the enemies you face will actually deal more damage to you. And even further, this game mode overall, enemies have a mutation where they have basically full-on armor penetration. So if you have this super powerful armor, you normally feel like a god, enemies in this will pierce through the vast majority of that. And there is a strategy around this, which I will explain in a moment, but you'll absolutely notice enemies in this game mode can just absolutely one-shot you. In particular, if you are a bloodied build, this is a nightmare tier game mode for you at times. It can be very, very difficult to face enemies, and stealth, of course, is highly encouraged. In addition, there are several new mutations added into the mixed group regeneration, where when enemies are near each other, they will heal each other. This honestly doesn't have much of an impact. It's one of the easiest ones. Swift-footed, which could be super daunting, is enemies will have faster movement speed and melee attack speeds. So if you're fighting a ranged enemy, it honestly isn't all that different, but if you're facing some melee enemies, they will sprint right up to you and can one-shot you again, so this could be super hard depending on your build. And then finally, toxic blood, where enemies on death will leave behind a poisonous, hazardous pool of gas. This is another one that I didn't find super difficult, but your mileage may vary. There are also 3 new types of enemies, so Scorched, Mothman Cultists, as well as Mole Miners, and then lastly 3 new locations, with Vault 96, the Watoga Raider Arena, as well as West Tech Research Center. And to be clear with this, because I've seen a lot of confusion overall, these are all added into the pool of what's going on. So when a daily op does pop up, it could be either the new game mode or the old game mode, and then any of the enemy types. All of the old enemy types or some of these new enemy types, any of the locations, whether it be the old locations with the new locations, and it could be any of the mutations. It's not like these mutations are exclusive to one game mode or another. You could have the mutation where enemies run faster to you on the old uplink game mode. So even though you won't really feel the effects of this now, and actually in fact right now is one of the harder combinations wherein enemies can basically one-shot you but are also resilient, so you have to run up and melee them. But over the next couple of months, it should make it so daily ops continue to feel much more fresh, because there's just way more combinations of what could be happening in the background. With this new game mode, you'll probably find that some of these combinations can be super difficult. I would say the game mode overall is not necessarily harder, but it definitely can be harder for certain builds and play styles. You just can't really play it the same way you did previously, and I think overall having more people is more beneficial with this one. You spend a lot of time running around looking for people, so having more members of your team looking for people makes it go quicker. And also power armor is invaluable this time around. Although enemies have armor piercing, power armor has damage reduction, which is different than armor. Just because it's an armor doesn't mean they could pierce right through it. It still is giving you quite a significant benefit that is worth noting. There are also a variety of new rewards added with this. We get some science chalkboards, a new armor with the Covert Scout armor. This coming in the 5 armor pieces, plus a mask that you can unlock via daily ops. This is going to be one of the rare rewards. It's better than regular scout armor, but it's still not the best armor in the game, but it does look kind of cool. The Wendigo tube plan that you can get from this, the Brotherhood of Steel wall emblem plan, the Enclave floor medallion, and then 2 legendary weapon plans that were previously unique weapons you get from survival mode, the medical malpractice, as well as the unstoppable monster. These plans are distributed to both the uncommon and the rare list. And actually the rewards overall got a bit of a rebalance here. Bethesda took several of the rewards that were typically on the rare list and moved them over to the uncommon list, so it will make it more likely you actually get one of the new rare rewards. So things like the Brotherhood of Steel Spec Ops suit and mask, the crowd bench seats, the Poodle sleeping bag, the Asylum light, the Super Mutant tube, all of those are now uncommon, meaning that if you never got them, you'll have a higher likelihood of getting them, but also they won't occupy that rare reward slot. Another interesting change, after the daily op does complete, enemies will stop spawning and all enemies existing in the world space will despawn. So you used to be able to just sit here and farm enemies, especially for ammo, but that is no longer a thing. Although you can just start up a daily op and do it anyway and just not complete it immediately. If you're in a daily ops team and your team disbands, it'll no longer immediately kick you from the daily op. In the uplink game mode, the time by which it takes to actually interact with the objects, like where you have to hold E on an object to register it, is now faster. So you'll spend a shorter amount of time doing that, which is nice. And enemies during daily ops will now count towards challenges. So cultists, blood eagles, robots, etc. now progress your daily challenge if it is required to kill them. Another really nice quality of life change, they actually added some additional avenues, tunnels, and sections to both the Burning Mind and burrows to make it a bit easier to move around in. This being super helpful on the new game mode where you could spend a lot of time just running up and down these tunnels looking for enemies. These changes definitely make it at least a bit easier. But overall, I would say the daily ops changes are a welcome and solid addition. It's really just basically all positive. Of course, from time to time, the daily ops will now be harder with the new game mode or depending on your build, but I don't think that's really a bad thing. The old daily ops at points got very, very easy. And again, this is one of those changes that's going to pay dividends over the long term. Hopefully we don't have to wait quite as long for the next daily ops expansion. I'd love to see another one in 2021, especially with how much content they've been putting behind this with some of those DLCs. I imagine with the next Brotherhood DLC, there will be even more content to unlock behind daily ops because it is Brotherhood themed and it's, well, a Brotherhood DLC. Season 4 also finally kicked off, and this was a super long awaited one. Season 3 ended up being one of the longest seasons ever, which I don't think was necessarily intentional. But season 3 does have some pretty cool new and unique rewards that are interesting, may want you to do at least some of this grind. One of the first ones you'll get early on is a carry weight booster. It'll add 50 carry weight to your character for 30 minutes, which is pretty great. There's sugar-free Nuka Shine, which will give you the Nuka Shine buffs without that blackout teleportation, although it still does affect your screen, unfortunately. Nuka Shine, although awesome, wasn't used practically that often because of course you get randomly teleported at the end, but this one will probably be a bit more usable. You actually get some tadpole badges if that was one aspect of the game you're ignoring. There's a gold-plated toilet, which is just hilarious, with the big power armor reward being that Commissioner Chaos power armor, coming in a couple of different colors, and it's definitely a polarizing design. I'm personally not the biggest fan of it, but it definitely looks interesting at the very least. Although one of the most notable additions with this is mannequins that can be unlocked at level 25 on the scoreboard, which will allow you to, of course, display armor or outfits in your base. Originally, there's going to be power armor displays also, but those were cut due to bugs, at least for the time being. And overall, even though I'm not a huge fan of grinding out this season, they actually seem to be really successful for this game, maintaining a lot of those active players and just giving them something to do. I think these new rewards will continue to incentivize people to do the seasons. And now that we have kind of a clear-cut roadmap, things are gradually starting to return to normal. I do hope this won't be another super long season. Perhaps season 5 won't actually be like 20 weeks away. And then outside of that, there were some miscellaneous changes to the game. Batch crafting is now here, which is a huge quality of life improvement. World activity got some changes, so you can now see the stuff happening around you or see vendors around you. This in particular is very handy. You no longer have to scour the map for these vendor icons. You can actually just click on them, see what they have for sale, and determine this from the world activity screen. Melee attacks really got some bug fixes, but they're so huge they just kind of became a feature. In the past, using melee with VATS or in general could lead to a lot of hit detection issues. Your hits would just not register. You deal 0 damage. Although it may not be perfect, even still, it is way better. So if you're a melee build, it makes using that build a lot more practical and just satisfying overall. We get aim assist for controllers, which of course is a pretty big update. The assist itself will actually vary from weapon to weapon, and in some like rifles and even pistols, it is pretty strong. It'll really move you from quite far away. Doesn't actually seem to work much at all on heavy weapons though, which is interesting, especially on the harpoon gun where you definitely want it. And lastly, a bunch of new treasure hunter stuff was added to the game. There's going to be a new treasure hunter event the first weekend of May, but apparently you could actually unlock some of the stuff already if you have some old unopened pals. Some of the most notable bug fixes we have here: they fixed the season rank up spam on screen. That was a huge problem and super frustrating. They fixed that problem where if one of the pieces of your armor broke and you repaired it but it was still equipped, it wouldn't actually provide the benefits to you. They made so the Hare and Park Ranger power armors now have appropriate damage and radiation resistances. This was a common problem. It happened with several ATX armors. And also, vertibots don't stutter around when they're flying anymore. Unfortunately, this update was not perfect. It did come with several issues overall. It seemed like whatever happened when it shipped, it just kind of broke the game. There's a ton of lag, server disconnects, unable to join/leave teams. Bethesda has taken the servers down across all platforms and fixed this already though, thankfully. But there are definitely some other lingering issues. The fast travel bug's still there. But more notably, something with weapon repair or durability overall. It seems to be messed up with weapons. And it looks like there might be some problems with some of the wind-up weapons, both in their damage as well as in the sounds they are making. But when it comes to the update overall and the question, is it a good time to return to Fallout 76? Is Locked and Loaded going to provide you that incentive or new interest to play? Well, one, hopefully this video provided as a good overview to answer that question for yourself. But even further, I still kind of feel like it's one of those weird ones where, similar to the January update, there's a ton of great stuff going on with this game. I'm happy all of this got added. I have very little negative to say at all. But is there a ton of incentive to come back just yet from this? If you're somebody who is already grinding the seasons and the battle pass overall is enjoyable to you, this will probably give you some more incentive, but you're probably already an active player then and are probably playing the update in general. If you're somebody who, let's say, hasn't played since Wastelanders, I don't really know if this is the time to come back yet. All this content is really good, but there really isn't that much new pure content itself. The new daily ops basically being all of it. And although those are fun and super enjoyable, one, there's only one new one per day, so you're not going to see all these new combinations all that quickly. So unless you just want to repeat the same thing over and over again over the course of a day without unlocking new rewards, because you can only unlock one set of rewards per day, that doesn't really make a ton of sense either. And I think for a good chunk of people, this isn't going to get you interested in the game again. Rather, the next update, that adding in Steel Rain, some new questing content, perhaps even new events and stuff, will get you interested in the game again. There's another great update that's going to have a ton of fun content to return to. In particular, those special loadouts can definitely provide a lot of intrigue, and maybe even for some of you, that is what's going to get you to come back. For me, the problem I run into is you're trying out a fun new build, and that is pretty enjoyable, but you're still doing the same stuff in the background. You're kind of grinding out some very familiar stuff. You start off with that one new daily op, but then you're just doing the same quests or the same events that you have been for the past year or so. So though I think this update will definitely get more people back into the game than the January one, I think it kind of falls into a similar vein. There's a ton of great content here, but if you're not interested in the battle pass grind, it might still just be a great idea to wait. Wait until you could play the full Steel Dawn to Steel Rain in completion, and then at the same time, try out the new daily ops, try out changing around your character, or even building a new camp now that you can. But again, of course, I'm sure for the vast majority of you, at this point, you could probably make that determination for yourself. If you already own the game and it's free, it doesn't really hurt to just re-download it to try out some of this new stuff, even if it's only for a couple of days before you get bored of it. And all of it really is a super great addition to Fallout 76. I think once we get that big content update, like when Steel Rain itself comes out, and let's say it's hopefully 8+ hours of questing content, and you have all this other new stuff to try out, there's going to be a lot of very happy and very impressed people that return to Fallout 76 that maybe haven't played since Wastelanders. But with that said, those are my thoughts and an overview of the update overall. Hopefully you guys found this one informative or just interesting. But with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.